The acacia trees stood like ancient sentinels across the Masai Mara, their thorned branches casting jagged shadows on the golden grass below. In the distance, thunder rolled across the horizon, not from storm clouds, but from the hooves of 300 buffalo charging through the dust. Yet beneath the largest baobab tree, a lone figure remained motionless. His amber eyes tracked every movement of the massive herd, calculating, waiting. This was Django, a solitary male lion whose name would soon be whispered across the savannah like a prayer and a warning combined. The year was 2019, and the Mara had seen its share of legends. Coalitions of brothers who ruled vast territories, prides that commanded rivers and watering holes for generations. But Django was different. He carried no allies, claimed no territory, and followed no rules except those written in his own blood. At 420 pounds of pure muscle, he was smaller than the coalition kings. Yet something in his presence made even the most seasoned rangers pause. His mane, dark as a midnight storm's, framed scars that told stories of survival against impossible odds. But on this scorching afternoon, he was about to write a chapter that would defy everything the savannah thought it knew about power. Buffalo herds are the moving fortresses of Africa. A single bull can weigh over 1,800 pounds, armed with horns that span 6 feet and a temperament that tolerates no weakness. When they move together, the earth trembles, and even the apex predators of the Mara step aside. Lions hunt buffalo, certainly, but always in coordinated attacks with multiple pride members targeting the old, the sick, or the separated. No sane predator challenges a healthy herd alone. The mathematics of survival simply do not allow it. Yet as the dust settled around Django that day, mathematics was about to encounter something far more dangerous than numbers. It was about to face will. The drought had lasted 7 months, longer than any in living memory. Rivers that once carved deep channels through the landscape now existed only as cracked scars in the earth. Watering holes that sustained thousands of animals had shrunk to muddy puddles, surrounded by the bones of those who had waited too long for rain. The Great Migration had stalled, herds clustering around the few remaining sources of water like desperate pilgrims. Competition for survival had reached a fever pitch, and in this crucible, only the most adaptable would endure. Django had learned adaptation in the harshest classroom imaginable. Born to a pride that was decimated by rival males when he was barely 2 years old, he had watched his mother fall defending cubs that would never reach adulthood. His siblings had scattered to the winds, some joining distant prides as subordinates, others falling to hyenas or starvation. But Django chose a different path. He walked alone, not from choice, but from necessity. And in that solitude, he discovered something that coalition lions never learn. When you have no backup, every decision becomes a matter of life or death. Every hunt sharpens your instincts to a razor's edge. For 3 years, he had haunted the borderlands between territories, surviving on scraps and opportunity. He learned to read the wind like a scripture, to understand the language of hoofbeats from miles away, and to strike with the precision of lightning when the moment demanded it. Other lions hunted with strength and numbers. Django hunted with intelligence and timing. He had taken down wildebeest twice his size, outmaneuvered hyena clans through sheer cunning. And once, in a moment that witnesses still debate, he had stolen a kill from 3 leopards without a single roar or display of aggression. He simply appeared, claimed what he needed, and vanished back into the grasslands like a ghost made of gold and shadow. But buffalo were different. Buffalo remembered. They held grudges that lasted generations, passing down the memory of threats through behaviors that seemed almost ritualistic. A herd that had been attacked by lions would alter their movements for months, sometimes years, developing patterns specifically designed to avoid predation. They were not just massive and dangerous. They were intelligent, organized, and utterly unforgiving. To hunt them alone was not just dangerous, it was considered impossible. The herd approaching Django's position numbered over 300 individuals. Bulls with horns like curved swords walked at the perimeter, their massive heads swaying with each step. Mothers kept calves close to their sides, while adolescents moved in the protected center of the formation. They moved with the confidence of creatures that feared nothing, their collective weight reshaping the landscape with every stride. Dust rose behind them like the wake of an ancient army, and their low rumbles carried across the plains like distant drums. Rangers watching from their vehicles had noted the herd's unusual behavior over the past week. Instead of following their traditional migration routes, they had begun moving in tighter formations, changing direction with an almost military precision that suggested they were responding to some threat. Camera traps had captured images of lone lions shadowing the herd's movements, but always at a distance, never close enough to pose a real danger. What the Rangers did not know was that Django had been studying this herd for over 2 months, learning their patterns, identifying their weaknesses, and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as the herd approached the acacia grove where Django waited. His breathing slowed to match the rhythm of his heartbeat, each exhale calculated to avoid disturbing even a blade of grass. Years of solitary hunting had taught him that patience was not just a virtue, but a weapon. While other predators relied on speed or strength, Django had learned to weaponize time itself. He could wait motionless for hours if necessary, becoming part of the landscape until his prey forgot he existed. The lead bull, a massive patriarch with scars covering his shoulders and horns polished smooth by decades of battles, paused 50 meters from Django's position. His nostrils flared as he tested the air, searching for the scent that his instincts warned him was present. Behind him, the herd slowed, their collective intelligence processing information that their leader was gathering. Buffalo do not survive in the wild by ignoring such warnings. Every member of the herd was now alert, ready to transform from grazing animals into a living weapon of horn and hoof. Yet Django remained invisible. His position downwind, combined with the acacia's natural camouflage and his own supernatural stillness, rendered him undetectable to even the most sensitive nose. He watched as the patriarch's eyes swept across the grove, passing over his location without the slightest recognition. The great bull's ears twitched, rotating like radar dishes, but Django's breathing had synchronized so perfectly with the wind that he produced no sound above the whisper of grass. What happened next would challenge everything that wildlife experts thought they understood about predator and prey dynamics in Africa. The herd resumed its movement, flowing around the acacia grove like water around a stone. But as the massive body shifted and swayed, Django's amber eyes fixed on something that made his muscles tense with anticipation. At the edge of the formation, separated from the main body by perhaps 20 meters of open ground, walked a young cow. She was healthy and strong, but her attention was focused on a calf that had strayed too far from the center. She kept turning back to urge the youngster forward, unaware that her protective instincts had created the exact opportunity that Django had been waiting months to find. The mathematics of the hunt shifted in that instant. 300 buffalo were still 300 buffalo, but one isolated cow was simply prey. The moment stretched like molten gold across the savannah. Django's muscles coiled beneath his midnight mane, every fiber of his being focused on the 20 meters of open ground that separated the young cow from her herd. In the wild, 20 meters might as well be 20 miles. It was the distance between safety and death, between the protection of numbers and the vulnerability of isolation. The cow continued her anxious dance, calling to her calf with soft grunts while remaining oblivious to the predator whose eyes had locked onto her like twin flames. But Django did not move. Not yet. Years of solitary hunting had taught him that the difference between success and failure often came down to seconds, to the precise moment when opportunity aligned with capability. He had seen countless hunts fail because predators moved too early, spooked by their own eagerness. He had also watched prey escape because hunters hesitated too long, allowing the window of possibility to slam shut. The art lay in recognizing the perfect intersection of timing and position. The herd continued its ponderous advance, and gradually the young cow found herself even more separated from the main body. Her calf had discovered something fascinating in the grass, perhaps a butterfly or a particularly interesting seed, and refused to move despite her increasingly frantic calls. She took several steps toward the youngster, then looked back at the departing herd, torn between her maternal instincts and her survival instincts. Each step she took toward her calf carried her further from safety. Django's breathing became so shallow it was barely perceptible. His heart rate slowed to match the rhythm of a stalking predator, every beat measured and controlled. The wind shifted slightly, carrying the scent of the herd away from him while bringing him the distinct aroma of the isolated cow. She was healthy, well-fed despite the drought, her muscles rippling beneath her dark hide. Under normal circumstances, she would be an impossible target for a lone lion. Buffalo cows were nearly as dangerous as bulls, armed with sharp horns and possessed of a fierce protective instinct that made them formidable opponents. The patriarch at the front of the herd had moved beyond the acacia grove now, his massive form creating its own weather system as dust swirled around his hooves. The main body of the herd followed like a living river, their collective rumble drowning out all other sounds. It was then that Django made his move, not with the explosive charge that most predators employed, but with the fluid grace of a shadow given form. His first steps were so careful, so precisely placed, that even the grass beneath his paws made no sound. He moved in a crouch so low that his belly nearly touched the earth, his powerful haunches propelling him forward in complete silence. The young cow remained focused on her calf, unaware that death itself was flowing across the ground toward her. 20 meters became 15, then 10, and still she did not sense his presence. The calf finally responded to its mother's calls and began trotting back toward the herd. The cow turned to follow, and it was in that instant of movement that Django struck. His explosion from concealment was like lightning tearing through storm clouds, all coiled power and devastating precision. The distance between them collapsed in 3 massive bounds. His claws extended, his massive frame hurtling through the air like a golden missile. The cow's head snapped around at the sound of his approach, her eyes widening in terror as she recognized the shape of her death bearing down upon her. She tried to turn, tried to run, but Django's calculations had been perfect. His trajectory intersected with hers at exactly the moment when she was off balance, her hooves scrambling for purchase on the dusty ground. His weight struck her shoulder with the force of a falling tree, driving her to her knees as his claws found their grip in her hide. But buffalo do not die easily. Even as Django's jaws clamped down on her throat, the cow fought with the desperate fury of a creature that knew its life hung by a thread. She bucked and twisted, her horns sweeping in deadly arcs as she tried to gore her attacker. Her hooves lashed out, each strike carrying enough force to shatter bone. Django rode her struggles like a sailor riding a storm, his grip never loosening, his claws anchored deep in her flesh. The sound of their battle carried across the plains like thunder. The sharp crack of horn against horn, the deep bellows of the struggling cow, and beneath it all, the low rumbling growl that seemed to emerge from the very earth itself. It was then that the herd realized what was happening. 300 massive heads turned as one. 300 pairs of eyes focusing on the lone lion that had dared to challenge their numbers. The patriarch's roar split the afternoon air like the crack of a whip. It was not the roar of surprise or fear, but of pure, incandescent rage. No predator attacked their kind without consequence. No lion, no matter how bold or desperate, challenged a buffalo herd and lived to boast of it. The great bull began his charge, his massive frame accelerating with surprising speed, and behind him, the entire herd followed. The ground trembled beneath the weight of their approach. Dust rose in clouds that blocked out the sun, and the sound of their hoofbeats was like the drumbeat of an approaching army. They came not as individuals, but as a single organism of horn and fury, their collective weight reshaping the very landscape as they thundered toward the lone lion who had dared to spill their blood. Django felt the vibration through the earth before he heard the sound. His amber eyes flicked towards the approaching horde, while his jaws maintained their death grip on the cow's throat. She was weakening now, her struggles growing more desperate but less coordinated. Blood flowed between his teeth, warm and metallic, carrying with it the taste of victory. But victory meant nothing if he did not live to savor it. The mathematics of survival shifted again. He had perhaps 30 seconds before the herd reached him. 30 seconds to finish his kill and escape, or 30 seconds to become nothing more than a smear of gold and crimson beneath 300 sets of hooves. The cow's breathing grew ragged, her eyes beginning to glaze with the approach of death. But she was still alive, still fighting, and every second she remained conscious was a second stolen from his escape. Time compressed into a series of heartbeats. The herd's approach grew louder, their collective roar drowning out all other sounds. Django's grip tightened, his powerful jaws working to crush the life from his prey. The cow's struggles weakened, her massive frame beginning to sag as consciousness fled. And still the thunder of hooves grew closer, promising a death that would make legends of them all. The cow's final breath escaped in a wheeze that seemed to echo across the savannah like a whisper of surrender. Django felt her massive frame go limp beneath his weight, her struggles finally ceasing as death claimed her. But there was no time for the ritual of victory, no moment to savor the kill that had taken months of planning. The thunder of approaching hooves had grown so loud it seemed to shake the very bones of the earth, and the dust cloud raised by 300 charging buffalo blotted out the afternoon sun like an advancing storm. Django released his grip and spun toward the oncoming horde. What he saw would have frozen the blood of any sane predator. The patriarch led the charge, his massive horns lowered like battering rams, his eyes burning with a fury that seemed to set the very air ablaze. Behind him, the entire herd moved as one organism of destruction, their collective weight turning the ground beneath them into a churning sea of dust and debris. They came not just to drive him away, but to obliterate him completely, to grind his bones into the earth as a warning to any predator foolish enough to challenge their supremacy. Most lions would have fled. Every instinct, every lesson learned through countless generations of evolution, screamed at Django to abandon his kill and run. The mathematics were simple and brutal. No single predator, no matter how powerful or cunning, could stand against the combined fury of a buffalo herd. It was not courage that kept lesser lions alive, but the wisdom to know when retreat was the only option. Yet as the ground trembled beneath the approaching stampede, Django did something that defied every law of survival the savannah had ever known. He stood his ground. His massive frame rose above the fallen cow, his midnight mane bristling with static electricity generated by the dust storms surrounding him. His amber eyes locked onto the patriarch's charging form, and from deep within his chest emerged a roar that seemed to tear the very fabric of the afternoon apart. It was not the roar of fear or desperation, but something far more primal and terrifying. It was the sound of a predator that had transcended the normal boundaries of his species, a creature that had looked into the face of impossible odds and chosen defiance over survival. The roar rolled across the plains like thunder given voice. Birds exploded from hidden roosts in the grass, their wings beating frantically as they sought escape from a sound that spoke of violence beyond their comprehension. Even the approaching herd seemed to hesitate for a heartbeat, their collective charge faltering as they processed the impossibility of what they were witnessing. Buffalo had faced lions before, had driven off entire prides through sheer numbers and determination, but they had never encountered a single predator willing to stand alone against their combined might. The patriarch recovered first, his rage overriding his confusion. He lowered his massive head and accelerated, his hooves carving deep gouges in the earth as he bore down on the lone lion. Behind him, the herd resumed their charge with renewed fury, their voices joining in a chorus of bellows that seemed to shake the very foundations of the Mara. The distance between them and Django collapsed with terrifying speed. 50 meters became 40, then 30, then 20. At 15 meters, Django moved. But instead of fleeing, he did something that no witness would ever forget. He charged directly at the approaching herd, his powerful legs propelling him forward with explosive force. The patriarch's eyes widened in disbelief as the lion hurtled toward him, a golden missile of muscle and fury that seemed to grow larger with every stride. The great bull had expected retreat, had planned for pursuit, but this frontal assault shattered every tactical assumption his ancient mind had formed. The collision was like the meeting of two storm fronts. Django's leap carried him up and over the patriarch's lowered horns, his claws raking across the bull's massive skull as he used the buffalo's own momentum to launch himself further into the air. The patriarch's charge carried him past the spot where Django had stood, his massive frame unable to stop or turn quickly enough to counter the lion's impossible maneuver. Django landed among the led ranks of the herd, his presence sowing chaos throughout their formation. Buffalo collided with each other as they tried to avoid trampling their own members while pursuing the lion, who seemed to dance between their hooves like a spirit of the wind. His movements were liquid, flowing from one impossible position to another, always one step ahead of the horns and hooves that sought to end his defiance. A young bull lunged at him from the right, his horns sweeping in a deadly arc that should have caught Django across the ribs. But the lion dropped beneath the strike, rolling under the buffalo's massive belly, before emerging on the other side like a golden shadow. Another cow charged from his left, her maternal fury driving her forward with reckless abandon. Django leaped over her back, his claws barely grazing her hide as he bounded toward a gap in the herd's formation. Thus ended the most impossible hunt ever witnessed in the Masai Mara. Django had not merely survived his encounter with 300 buffalo, he had rewritten the very laws that govern predator and prey relationships across Africa. Rangers would speak of this day in whispered tones for decades to come, their voices carrying the weight of something that transcended normal wildlife behavior. The lone lion who dared challenge a herd and lived to tell the tale had become more than flesh and blood. He had become legend itself, carved into the golden grasslands with claws and courage that knew no equal.